if there's anything I despise talking about, it absolutely, without a doubt, definitely is the trans sports subject. I hate talking about it so much. There are so many reasons for this. One is that I don't really care about sports. Two is that there aren't many trans athletes in the country, okay? Most trans people, especially young trans people, are too busy being cringe and developing autistic niche interests in video games, anime, and like whatever else. I don't know, fidget spinners, okay? They're not doing sports. Like some are, but that's like definitely the minority of trans people. So it seems like a waste of time to talk about anyway. I've always considered to be like an ultimate distraction issue. The God's honest truth is that in the grand scale of like which issues I care about, transgender people in sport, well, let's be real, trans women in sports is really low down just because it affects so few people relatively. Like, and compared to the other stuff going on, like not to say it's not important, just it's way, way, way lower down. And a lot of the times it seems like a distraction. You know what I mean? There are undeniable biological differences between trans and cis women. The real question is like, okay, well, to what extent does this weigh on like athletic viability? And this is like a really nuanced topic that a lot of people are going to have really strong intuitive opinions on, really gut reaction kind of dealios, especially since the right-wing people tend to think that every trans woman looks like me in a dress, so they're like, ah, yeah, of course, they're 3 times as strong as the average cis woman. Whereas, if you ever arm wrestle a transgender woman, their arms are like uncooked noodles. I mean, just incredibly fragile, just like dolls, because they're taking weakness juice. They're taking muscle and bone shrinking hurt juice. Apparently, Joe Biden loves talking about it because he's ignited discourse. We love our discourse, don't we? I don't. Biden's sports plan angers transgender advocates, opponents. Really, really getting out there, huh? A Biden administration proposal to forbid outright bans on trans athletes sparked outrage from conservative leaders while also angering trans rights activists who note schools could still prevent some athletes from participating on teams that align with their gender identity. The proposed rule, which still faces a lengthy approval process, establishes that blanket bans like those that have been approved in at least 20 states would violate Title IX. Okay, well, that's nice. Okay. And I agree they would violate Title IX, by the way. I think that any ban on discrimination by somebody's gender is necessarily a ban on discrimination by somebody's transgender status. Those are inseparable, conceptually. The landmark gender equity legislation enacted in 1972. But schools that receive federal funding could still adopt policies that limit trans students' participation, particularly in more competitive high school and college sports. So he's actually threaded the needle here, and he's made it possible somehow to attempt to block all of these discriminatory pieces of legislation from the GOP while also allowing for discrimination, like broadly. That doesn't seem as bad as it's been made out to be, Vaush. Well, here's the thing, okay? No. This is like, I don't even want to call it like a centrist position. It's more like the most the Biden administration could do without having to defend a more specific kind of protections for transgender athletes. That doesn't mean that what he's doing here is correct or optimal or whatever. A lot of people seem to believe that what he's doing here is kind of like vindictive or like a betrayal, and I don't think that's true. I think it's just kind of a half measure, which is, it's Biden. Like, well, yeah, like it's not good. I'm not defending it. It's just, yeah, I disagree with people who are treating this like it's a betrayal, because that would imply that he was some kind of radical trans advocate anyway. It's just the kind of policy that you would expect from like a centrist Dem. Under the proposal, it would be much more difficult for schools to ban, for example, a trans girl in elementary school from playing on a girls' basketball team, but would also leave room for schools to develop policies that prohibit trans athletes from playing on more competitive teams if those policies are designed to ensure fairness or prevent sports-related injuries. Imara Jones, a trans woman who created the Anti-Trans Hate Machine podcast, blasted the proposal, saying Joe Biden is attempting to straddle the fence on a human rights issue ahead of an election year by giving legal recourse to schools that bar some trans athletes from competition. She is correct. She is. I think the goal here with the Biden administration, like I think what he's attempting to do here is he's attempting to take a step against this ridiculous wave of anti-trans legislation, but he also doesn't want to put himself in a position where he or his administration are considered liable for an inability for any specific school to deal with some hypothetical scenario where some ultra masculine trans woman crushes the competition and everyone says it's unfair. Does that make any sense? Basically, it's like, okay, we're going to smack away all of this crazy GOP legislation, but they're afraid of like a hypothetical trans female Giga Chad arising. You know, like 7 feet tall, shoulders as broad as a barn, walking into their, middle school cisgender female volleyball team and killing everybody with their spikes. And then, of course, the school, they cry out, "Biden, won't you save us from this monster of a woman?" And Biden will say, "Sorry, Jack," and he'll put on a second pair of aviators. I think what's happening here is Biden doesn't want that to happen, so he's threading the needle in such a way as to give schools and other administrations the ability to discriminate on a more selective basis. Does that make sense? Again, this isn't the defense of the way in which he's threading the needle. I just think that's the best explanation for what he's doing, rather than just being vindictive or like disregarding or whatever. It makes sense, but it's annoying. Yeah. That's totally fair. Here's the DOE fact sheet. Yeah, we'll take a look. Hold on. They won't actually need to be selective with their bans, right? They'll just need to pretend to be. Yeah, of course. Like, obviously, if they're given like the leeway to do any kind of discriminatory legislation, like on a school by school level, then they'll always have a way. NPR poll shows 63% of Americans are in some way against trans athletes in sports. Yeah, so another thing is like a majority of Americans are accepting of trans people, but this is a way harder issue to sell people on for reasons that, let's be fair, you should all know. If you don't understand why the average American doesn't like agree with you on this, then you're in a bubble. You know what I mean? It is an incredibly ultra complicated issue that requires literal like doctorates in sports science to even begin to dive into it on like a research basis. And everybody knows men are stronger than women. So if you talk about gender being an identity thing, that's step one, but that doesn't change the fact that I'm probably a lot stronger than your average woman, and my identity isn't going to change that. Obviously estrogen does, but that hasn't been a national discourse, We haven't had like a 3-year sort of broadly disseminated class on biology and the effect of estrogen on on human health. Aren't some trans women weaker than some cis women after? Well, it's variance. There are cis men who are weaker than some cis women. It's people are all over the place. We'll talk about the science in a second, because I got this email and I wanted to look at it. Not the email, but the research that it provided me. Thereafter. However, I do want it to be made clear. I have never thought that this is the issue that we should care about. You understand what I'm talking about? Like, look, overall, strongly oppose 43% for everyone, not just for Republicans. Even 20% of Democrats strongly oppose transgender female student athletes competing on women's and girls sports teams. If you include somewhat opposed, then yeah, that's 63% for everyone. Nearly 50% for Dems. Obviously, Republicans, it's clear through, independents and such. And you know what? I really don't blame the average American for this, because again, like, outside of the bubble of trans acceptance, of real trans acceptance, you gotta know this is a way, way harder sell. Identity, access to health care, those are like human rights issues. Those are sympathy issues, Whether or not you treat a trans person well, you can tap into human empathy there. Not so much with a person's ability to play sports when the person perceives, potentially, trans women as being able to crush cis women in most competitions. This is why educating the masses on trans issues is kind of a big deal. It'll never happen. You might be able to get a kind of blanket, unthinking, uncritical acceptance, but expecting the average American to make voting and polling decisions based on a level of biology that is so advanced that it's not even like you have to graduate high school. It's not even like bachelor's degree. Like this stuff is discussed in like giant collegiate journals. The idea that the average American will be like, how stupid voters are. There's no way. But you can get a kind of blanket, unthinking acceptance where people just go like, "Oh, okay," and maybe that's the most you can hope for. If you went up to the average American and asked them like how they felt about racism, far and away most Americans would say they thought it was bad. If you asked them why it's bad, you would get, it's like you shouldn't like judge a person. Then you can be like, well, don't you judge people all the time? Like, if you were walking by someone and they appeared to be homeless, wouldn't you think, oh, that's a homeless person, and adjust your behavior accordingly? And they'd be like, and then they would explode. Okay, the average voter should not don't take their internal process for granted. It's NPC shit. At least on average, it is on average, aggregate. Yeah, error. Do you honestly think most voters are stupid? Yes, obviously, of course. We're talking about advanced biology here, not even civics. Here, on the plus side, do you support state laws or policies that classify gender transition medical care for youth as child abuse? So do you think it's child abuse for youth to medically transition? And here, leaving out the not familiars with this, overall, you can see that the majority of people oppose. So this is oppose these policies and laws. 13 and 32 together are 45 versus 26. So 26 to 45. That's probably like a 65 to 35 split, maybe? No, more like 60-40. Significantly more people would oppose these laws than support them overall. Even amidst Republicans, it's not as hard of a gap as it is. I am only pointing this out to indicate that the trans sports issue really is the hardest sell when it comes to getting folks over. AOC said that the plan from the Biden administration was indefensible and embarrassing. And look, I liked it. See? Do you think voters being stupid is natural or more they're purposefully kept stupid? A lot of it is the latter, but guys, voters will never be able to make, in aggregate, informed decisions based on complicated biology. That has never happened in all of human history. It'll never happen. It just isn't. That's just not that. So this is the reason why, by the way, I'm of the opinion that stuff regarding trans healthcare and trans sports should be left to doctors, medical associations, and sports physicists. Sports physicians, sorry. I think that this is high-level technocratic stuff that should be dealt with by experts in the field, not sort of broadly given to public opinion. Do you think if you ask the average American if they think it's child abuse too, and then you describe the process for an appendicitis, they would all say no? Because if you ask a person, hey, do you think it's child abuse for I don't know, a kid to get appendicitis if their appendix explodes or whatever, everyone will say no. But if you're do you think you should be able to put a youth down a table, inject them with a chemical that puts them to sleep, cut their stomach open, blah, 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 all of a sudden, appendicitis illegal, doctors arrested nationwide, you can't, there's a reason why we leave some stuff to the experts. The average person really should not be. Do you think it's healthy to eat apples? Why, of course. And then you read the chemicals in an apple, I'm sorry, are you seriously okay with allowing your children to eat a collection of phytochemicals, including curacin, catechin, fluorizine, and chlorogenic acid? Oh, why, no, I didn't. No, I won't be eating apples anymore, yeah, just to the technocrats, the technocratic issue should be left. Aaron Reed, I know Aaron Reed, we're oomphies. Apple seeds have cyanide? Yeah, cherry seeds have quite a lot of it. This whole document is worse than doing nothing. Yeah, let's see the actual document, or relevant snippets of it. Eligibility criteria would fall within the scope of the proposed regulation if they are sex-related, including by imposing legislation. Deny the criteria included a requirement limiting or denying a student's eligibility for a male or female team based on a sex marker on an ID document, such as birth certificate. Yeah, this basically makes it so this is basically saying all right, listen up, schools. If you want to have laws, if you want to have policies against trans athletes, you better make them yourself. You can't do this at a state level. You have to do this yourself. Though, to be fair, okay, the real risk of anti-trans athlete stuff has always been state level legal bias. Oftentimes, these schools individually don't want to do it because these schools individually would defer to these policies to the only people at that school capable of making these judgments. And usually that would be the coaches presiding over the trans athlete, right? If you have a trans woman who's really good at water polo and she's kicking ass, and then there's some fuss about her doing well, who is the school going to defer to when it comes to whether or not a policy should be made that would lead to their star athlete, the water polo girl, being kicked out? probably the person whose job it is to have been training the water polo girl. You understand what I'm talking about? This isn't to say no discrimination will happen, but like we've seen a lot of examples of colleges and even high schools being permissive of trans athletes, and it being the state politicians that look at this, that freak out, that start, screaming about this on social media, that make it a state law. Yeah, okay. We'll still see bad consequences of this, but I do think this is better. It might actually be a lot smarter to do this because deferring it to every school, it's kind of like Biden is doing the states' rights thing, except instead of states' rights, it's every school district's rights, right? Like the whole states' rights thing is we'll get rid of a federal policy, allow the states to decide, and therefore like half the states won't have it. So we get a 50% victory. But what Biden's doing here is, okay, well, we're not letting the states decide, actually. Every individual school in a state will have to individually implement discriminatory policy in order to have the same effect that we would have had if the state had gone through with it. And that's not going to happen, which means it's still a net victory. You guys get what I'm talking about? Actually, the more I think about this, the more I feel like it's actually really, really smart policy. I still obviously like a blanket. I don't want to be like moderate on it, but when I think about it, it feels like it's what could he do more? Like what's the more good thing that he could do? I'm trying to think. I think I would need to talk to somebody who disagrees with me to see if I could have my opinion changed. Wouldn't the state government just withhold funding until the district complies? I mean, that seems like it's a different road to go down. But if that's the case, then nothing Biden done would have changed anything because they could just withhold funding based on like any set of criteria, you know? Always the debate, bro? No, okay. Do some of you understand what I'm talking about here? Because the more extreme thing he could have done would have been to leave no provisions at all for any kind of discriminatory policy making. But as I understand it, I don't know if there's a precedent for that from like federal policy. I feel like doing that would potentially open the Biden administration up to liabilities concerning there not being room for edge cases, or suddenly it's like the government is imposing on us or whatever, and that's like more difficult for the admin to defend. I get a lot of this is also influenced by the fact that I don't care that much about the trans sports issue relative to other stuff. So this headline may or may not have played a role in this decision making. School that refused to play team with trans player barred. A Vermont religious school that withdrew its girls' basketball team from a playoff game because a trans student was playing on the opposing team. Damn. So that trans student is so powerful that they were able to defeat the team without even playing against them. That's wild. Won't be able to participate in future tournaments, the Vermont Principals Association announced Monday. I'm sure a better policy could be made, but I feel like the underlying logic here is sound? Not ideal, but still sound. If the GOP can't put strictly no trans restrictions in, the restrictions they do put in will hit cis students, and that's when lawsuits come in, torpedoing actual attempts to discriminate against trans people. I hate doing this live because, like, I don't actually know. I feel like people are going to clip me and go, like, Vaush is alt-right now or whatever. But I'm trying to think. Your driver's license. Criteria requiring physical examinations or medical testing or treatment related to a student's sex characteristics will also fall within the proposed regulation scope. The results of such examination, testing, or requirements of treatment could be used to limit or deny a student's eligibility to participate consistent with their gender identity. Such criteria, like other sex-related eligibility criteria, would have to adhere to the proposed regulations requirements, including the requirement to minimize harms. But it forces the school itself to be the one to do this, which dampens the ability to put this forward so much. I can't read this as any way other than a betrayal. The entire document is worse than doing nothing. Really? The administration will argue this was nuanced and disallows outright bans. Republicans will run with this as justification. School boards will use this to ban. Okay, so I guess my question is like, how frequently do school boards initiate the discriminatory process as opposed to like compared to the state level stuff going on, you know? And additionally, there are a lot of school boards that are conservative, but the whole trans athlete thing really comes about at university levels. Universities are disproportionately liberal, at least their student body tend to be. And how many college boards have like individually banned trans athletes from participation? We've been focusing so much on the state level stuff, but I don't, how many times has that happened with the Transgender athletes face bans from girls' sports in 10 U.S. states. It's all state law stuff. Man, I don't know. I'd have to think about it. So not local? Yeah, I feel like a lot of universities aren't going to want to do this. It is true they can be intimidated by state legislatures, but that's still better than the state legislatures just doing it themselves through state law. Yeah, I'll have to consider this like a pending thing. I'll think on it. Yeah, I can see cases on both sides. Let's clean this up. Hold on, we have something more important to talk about. Science. All right, I'm a man of science. You're all men of science. Maybe some of you. I got an email recently. Here, hold on. A fantastic literature review conducted by members of the E-Alliance Scientific Committee regarding trans people's participations in elite sporting events. Not talking about high schoolers here. The literature review focused on both biological and socio-cultural factors. Okay, so we have the review here. Hold on. Only peer-reviewed primary research and syntheses published in reputable academic journals between 2011 and 2022 were allowed. Okay, here are some pointers. Available evidence indicates trans women who have undergone testosterone suppression have no clear biological advantages over cis people in elite sport. The higher level of red blood cell count experienced by cisgender men is removed within the first 4 months of testosterone suppression. There is no basis for athletic advantage conferred by bone size or density other than advantages achieved through height. Elite athletes tend to have higher than average height across genders, and above average height is not currently classified as an athletic advantage requiring regulation. Yeah, can you imagine if it was? On average, trans women who are pre-testosterone suppression still have lower lean body mass, cross-section area, and strength than cisgender males. This indicates the performance benefit experienced by these individuals cannot be generalized by examining cis male athletes. Non-athletic trans women experience significant reduction in lean body mass, cross-section area, and strength loss within 12 months of hormonal suppression. It is important to note that this 12-month threshold is arbitrarily defined, and no significant studies examine the rate of LBM-CSA or strength reduction over time broadly. When adjusting for height and fat mass, LBM-CSA, and strength after 12 months of testosterone suppression, trans women still retained statistically higher levels than sedentary cis women. However, this difference is well within the normal distribution of LBM, CSA, and strength for cisgender women. LBM, CSA, and strength loss continues for trans women after the 12-month initial testosterone suppression. The limited available evidence examining the effect of testosterone suppression as it directly affects trans women's athletic performance shows no athletic advantage exists after 1 year of testosterone suppression. Post-gonad removal, that's orchiectomy. Funny name, though, gonad. Many trans women experience testosterone levels far below that of premenopausal cis women. Many trans inclusion sport policies use arbitrary bounds that are not evidence-based. Elite sport federations often apply none, 1, 2, 3, or more of the following criteria based mostly on their own perspectives/ideologies. Gender declaration, stable gender identification after 2 or 4 years, hormonal level, request for therapeutic use exemption, physical and morphological criteria, medical file, or medical appointment. Then there's a paragraph on how many of these sports organizations have criteria that are senseless. And then here are a set of conclusions pulled together in the synthesis from this research. There is no current substantial research evidence of any biological advantages that would impede the fairness of trans women competing in elite women's sports. There currently exists no evidence to suggest trans women who elect to suppress testosterone maintain disproportionate advantages over cis women indefinitely. Current evidence suggests any biological advantages trans women have in sport performance do not fall outside the range observed among cis women after testosterone suppression. And it goes on like that for a while. Oh, that's nice. I'll have to synthesize this and add it to my research document once I'm done updating it. Wonderful. Yeah, the main thing that I'm curious about is reading more on the section about bone density. There are biological changes that testosterone suppression and taking estrogen can have on trans women, but they do tend to have higher bone density, though this study seems to suggest that the change in bone density doesn't actually have an effect on athletic performance, so that's interesting. Vaush, I think people are upset with the idea that rural districts in blue states could ban trans sports, even as it saves city districts in red states. I guess I just don't know how many trans athletes there are yearning to break free in high schools, in rural districts, in blue states, and in a way that would like make this not like we're mostly talking about a college thing, right? I gotta say, I care even less about like high school transgender athletes. Like come on, we're really down the list of priorities here. At least college is the point where athletics have the ability to start like kicking into like mainstream, like not just your local town shit or whatever. It's more the principle. Yeah, well, high school sports recruitment is very big though. Yeah, but like I defer again to like the relative size of these problems. Let me be a guy who's extremely concerned with the broader transgenocide thing and not the guy who's because you know that in order for the study that I just read out to be valid, like we're talking post testosterone suppression for trans women, right? We're talking about like what? So they start like hormone blockers at 14, and then at 16 they get on E and T suppressant, and then at 17 their senior year, that's when they start playing on the girls. Like this is edge case stuff, okay? I've been on Twitter. 99.9% of you trans bitches are busy, I don't know, drawing werewolves and getting obsessed with shows from the early aughts that Tumblr stopped caring about years ago. I'm keeping my eyes on the prize here, okay? Isn't this a matter of normalization slash stigmatization, though? Like having segregated water fountains didn't cause very much direct harm, but it's part of the set of regulations on minority groups? Yeah, well, the question would be, like, would there be any potential downside to Joe Biden blanket banning this, like, on like, discrimination on every level, even school to school, individually, when it comes to criteria for, like, sports inclusion? And I can think of some ways there could be a political, like, blowback to that. But like I said, I would have to think about it. Are you going to go over the fact sheet? The fact sheet? What the fuck is the fact sheet? Dude, this is so long. Oh my god. Where are the facts? Yeah, what are we, nerds? Jesus. Could check the bold text for key sections. Okay, I'm checking the bold text. The proposed regulations text. Damn, that was good. Get me out of here. Get me out of the goddamn transports debate. Please, God.